Hello everyone, this is Professor Moore and this is an English Power Lecture. And today's English Power Lecture is going over questions, how to use them and when to use them in essays. So starting off, let's talk about what questions are. So I think everyone knows what a question is, but in essays, questions refer to any transition or call to the reader that ends in a question mark. So that kind of like that quotation or that punctuation mark, the question mark, is kind of the telltale sign of a question. No, it's shocking. Questions are a common and important part of both verbal and written communication. This lecture is not trying to tell you not to use questions. It's trying to explain to you how to use them properly. So questions in writing can be abused and overused. When they're abused and overused, they will cost you points in your essay. The fundamental and main rule to follow for questions in an essay is never ask a question you do not intend to answer within the paragraph it is asked. If you follow that one rule, all the other things will kind of fall into place. Now, let's talk about how this comes into play. So since questions primarily should be used as an intra-paragraph transition, there are several ways questions can be misused. And again, all of these things I'm about to list should be avoided. One such thing is ending a paragraph with a question. By ending a paragraph with a question, you cannot answer that question within the paragraph, so it's something you should not do. Substituting a question for a thesis statement. This is one of those things that happens quite often in papers, and by definition, a thesis statement should be a statement, not a question. So never ever have a question substituting for a thesis statement. Another error, chaining together multiple questions. The more questions you chain together, the higher the chance that you're not going to properly answer those questions within the paragraph. Including rhetorical questions. Since the rule states you have to answer the question within the paragraph, asking a question that, like by definition, doesn't have an intended answer is breaking that rule. Relying on questions exclusively as a transitional device, even though this it kind of goes outside the rule a little bit. But when the only transition you have is a question, it just gets into a repetitive mode. It kind of lacks the variety that you need in writing. So even though it doesn't kind of follow the rule I've stated before, you still don't want to only use questions as the only transitional device you have in order to avoid repetition, which is just something you want to avoid in general. And then finally, going back to the primary thing here, if you ask a question and then you don't provide an answer within the paragraph, that is an error because it's breaking the rule by what the rule is. That literally is breaking it. All right. So why are these rules about questions? Why do we even care how questions are used? So well, misuse of questions is extremely common, right? It's kind of one of those de facto things that we go to when we're kind of out of other options. Like, oh, what do I write here? Well, I'll ask a question. And it's because of that they end up being abused. They're a wonderful tool. They are an important part of speech and writing, but because they're kind of a de facto or a default for people to go back to, they often get misused. Essays are based on statements of fact and analysis. Because essays need to be based on statements of fact and analysis, you shouldn't overuse questions. Another problem with questions is that they generally make use of second person. This is that dreaded you form. This is a point of view slip, something that I've talked about in the past, and it needs to be avoided as well. Second, the more questions that you have, the greater the chance of failing to provide an answer for them. So the more you rely on questions, the more you have a chance of breaking that rule of answering the questions that you ask within the paragraph that you ask it. And this is especially true when you chain questions together. Remember, an essay's purpose is to provide answers and ideas. Unanswered or lingering questions hurt the fundamental goal of an essay. Finally, learning to rely less on questions as transitions and for openings helps you get into more complex and sophisticated writing techniques, breaking free of that kind of like, I have to use a question because I don't know what else to do. It is a very basic part of speech, therefore we rely on it probably more than we should. By breaking free of that, by not relying on questions, you're forcing yourself to use more advanced techniques in your writing. All right, so questions. Too long didn't read? Questions are a part of how we communicate. They are absolutely essential. I am not in any way trying to say that we should not use questions. I'm trying to say that you need to be careful how you use questions in writing. In essays, limit your question use. They are best used as a transitional device within paragraphs. Always remember, essays should be comprised primarily of statements and not questions. Avoid second person and always answer any question you ask within the paragraph that you ask it. This means you should never end a paragraph or essay with a question. All right, that is it for this English Power Lecture. I hope you found it useful.